ATS. So for those of you out there who don't know what an ATS is, it's an applicant tracking system. And as this is a follower candidate-led podcast, I've invited along two people who know all about ATSs and have used them in their day-to-day lives. We've got Adrian Matthew here from Hireful, who actually own and run their own ATS. And we've got Matthew Metcalf, who is a senior talent acquisition lead for Covea Insurance, and who obviously deals and has worked on ATSs there and how it refines and affects our lives. So thank you guys both for joining us on Talking Flex. I guess we'll just jump straight into it, Adrian, with you. What is an ATS?
This should be the simple question. Yeah, I suppose from the candidate perspective, the ATS is the software that sits behind the application process that sort of gathers all the information and then makes the recruiter's job easier. Because I suppose in modern day, there's quite a lot of applications can come through, and recruitment and HR teams are quite small. Like most things in life, everything's got more and more efficient.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess some of the feedback we've had, and we've had quite a lot of new joiners to Find Your Flex over the last few months. And as you can imagine, it's quite a talent heavy market out there, job seeking at the minute. And one thing that they've learned, having never been in recruitment before, coming into this environment, they'd never even heard of ATS systems or understood that all of the thousands of rejections they've had over the last 12 months has come at the hands of a computer or an algorithm versus a real life person. And actually, that made them feel better about being rejected that many times. Weirdly, rather than, I don't know, I think it was easier being rejected by a computer than by a real life person who's maybe actually looked at their CV and took the time to read it. So, I mean, from your perspectives, guys, in terms of A, the person who's built an ATS, and B, the person who uses it on a daily basis as part of their recruitment and hiring, are there any, I guess, I don't know, where should we start actually? Is an ATS for you guys, the employers, or is it for the candidates? Who does it serve best, in your opinion?
I think both. And I think I'm talking from an employer's point of view. I think it clearly favours the employer. If I think around where we were 12 months ago with no ATS, a myriad of spreadsheets, trying to keep thousands of CVs in digital files, it's incredibly hard to do that, and candidates get lost inevitably. So I think to be able to monitor positions, multiple vacancies, see where candidates are in the recruitment pipeline, I think it's really important for large employers. Adrian's talked about this. It creates efficiencies, and that's one of the number one benefits for us, particularly when you think around scheduling interviews or moving into the sort of the offer process. For candidates, in theory, it should make an application process easier. I think some ATSs do allow you to track progress, so that piece where you apply for a role and you're waiting to hear, actually that self-service element, I think, starts to add more value.
Yeah, I think there's almost two sides. There's two types of ATS now. There's sort of older school tech, without getting too far into it, and there's a sort of more modern new systems out there. The more modern new systems have definitely been designed to be candidate first, and the older systems out there are pretty terrible. But actually, I'll talk about it later. Maybe there's some good tactics for candidates around some of those older school systems. Yeah,
we'll definitely be getting onto those hints and tips. I think, understanding, I think, who it's designed for and whether or not it's in balance. Like you said, there's difference between older system and newer systems. And I think, it's for candidates this to get their head around what an actual ATS is, because there's loads of other companies that are popping up now trying to help candidates navigate it. So you've got loads of CV writing services out there now that are using keywords and that to try and circumnavigate the ATS process. Are they worth their salt, in your opinion?
No, I don't think so. I think that, I guess it's how confident you are in terms of your own CV. But there's so much free content online that you can go away and you can find that tech that will help you, particularly around that. How do you beat the ATS? that main challenge. We've produced free content in terms of writing CVs. That's available for the students that we work with. It's available now on our website. And I think most employers feel like, as part of their outreach work, that's what they want to do. So I think it should be relatively easy to find an employer in your local community that can help with that, rather than paying someone to do something for you.
I mean, Adrian, as an ATS designer, the podcast 2 that we recorded this morning was talking about people who want to change industry and recareer, so looking at skills-based CVs versus traditional chronological ones. Are ATS systems designed with that in mind? Does it help or hinder people who are looking to recareer? Because obviously there's recareering skills-based CVs, but there's also people who have got to their seniority through experience versus qualifications as well. And I guess it's understanding how the application tracking systems that lots of businesses use now, how that all marries together so that the right candidates do get through the initial sift processes.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like so much beating the ATS. I think that's a bit of a funny. I get where the phrase comes from. I'm not sure if I buy into that as a phrase. I think it's probably just the culture of recruiters as well. So some organisations will be, quite geared up to take people transferring. I guess hospitality. Lots of people left that industry now. They will have to embrace, even if they didn't before, they will have to embrace people transferring from different industries, I guess. So, with that in mind, they'll build a recruitment process to support that. So for me, the bigger challenge is winning those hearts and minds of recruiters and getting people to open up to those things. You will see more systems enabling assessment now beyond the CV or as part of the application, whether that's, a quick 90 seconds video showcase where you just sort of pitch and say, look, I am genuinely interested in this role. This is what I do. This is why I want to transfer. These are my, and actually, if anyone's going to train anyone to do anything in the future, maybe that might be where, the training comes in is those communication skills and how to maybe perform well in an interview rather than a CV. A CV is only going to help you, if you've got a bad CV, that'll remove you from the process. Fine. But the good CV won't get you the job in the same way.
Okay, we maybe need to do a separate podcast on what is actually a good CV. I think something else that came up this morning when we were talking about transferable skills and the difficulties in, I guess, a non-linear career path, which I think ATS has historically been more geared to, is, what also happens to those people who have dyslexia, for example. I mean, just to give you an example, one of my old FDs, he literally used to throw out CVs. It could be the best candidate in the world, but if there was a grammatical or spelling error, they went straight into the bin. I mean, I'm assuming ATS systems don't do that to that extent, but obviously in terms of how the algorithms are all designed, bias, all of that kind of stuff, how is that kind of offset throughout this process? And is that something that, Matthew, you can get involved with as an employer, and Adrian, you guys have to be mindful of when you're actually developing these systems?
Yeah, inevitably there's got to be bias in systems where algorithms are being built by a human, and so something will slip in there. I think, to Adrian's point around winning hearts and minds of hiring managers and recruiters, I think if you're looking at a CV purely on face value and you're removing grammatical errors, think about how many people you're excluding from a process that have the skills and abilities to do that role. And I think it's for hiring managers to start looking beyond that very traditional, as you've just described, that very traditional, I don't like, there's a misspelling or there's a grammatical error and therefore they are not good enough for my business. Because we know we've got technology within the business to support people who may need additional accessibility resources or support.
I think the technology is moving on now. So a lot of people are not using algorithms. So I think a lot of stuff gets spoken about, like the computer is choosing who's coming through, and that's for the vast majority of stuff. That's not actually the case. And obviously a lot, if you look at who's employing people in this country, it's mostly SMEs is the vast majority of staff, and they're not all using high-end ATS. But I think what's happening in the future is more employers will have more options available to maybe go with more even assessment first approaches. And I think if they can pilot some of that stuff and say, look, let's try this, I think their eyes will be opened once they see that. There could be a good wave of of change coming from that, where more and more organizations start to say, well, what does the role do? Let's build that into an assessment and let's measure people based on that. And then we'll bring them in for the formal interviews like we would normally.
Yeah. And do you think that's down to job descriptions then? I mean, I know, Matthew, you and I have spoken quite a lot this year around output, and actually that job descriptions in the UK and beyond need to change to strip out, what I call nonsense, but like all of the emotive stuff, and actually get employers to just look at the output of specific roles, like what actually do you need? Because as far as I'm concerned, the journey to get there, as long as the final destination is what your employer wants, it shouldn't matter what skills or what learnings you've had to get you there, as long as you get there, right? And I think a lot of job description these days is like to have this, that, and the other. And we know the psychology is different between the sexes. We know that men will apply for a job that they can do 50% of. Women need to be closer to 90% before they apply. And I think when you also throw in an ATS system into the mix that maybe has been set up by an employer, be it through an algorithm or through some new type of AI that doesn't really speak to the emotion and maybe more to the output, whether or not that will actually help people as we move forward. I mean, Adrian, is it going in that direction, do you think?
I mean, AI is coming here, definitely. I think how far AI goes, we just don't know. I think there's an interesting, a lot of the AI stuff being done already has been shown to sort of repeat biases that already exist, because it sort of looks at what the recruiter's been doing previously and then works out what the recruiters want to see, and they feed them that. So if it was more male developers, then that's what they sent them. There's a wonderful case study it's not a case study, wonderful news story that leaked out of Amazon and their wonderful system. But for me, I mean, it's interesting. It'd be interesting to see what the view is on AI. So at the moment, under GDPR, without getting too technical, if you're being processed automatically, you have to opt into that. And that's even just a simple, as they call it, a killer question, where it says, have you got a driving license? You have to opt into that process. And technically, you can choose to opt out of that process. So it'd be interesting to see when legislation does come in around AI, because my suspicion, without getting too technical about this, is I think what legislation will be certainly the EU legislation, which doesn't apply to us anymore, but will be around, you have to be able to show people how they're being stored you have to be able to show them the algorithm, but not in a technical way, in a very basic, easy to understand way. And then if you're Tesco or Sainsbury's, do you want to show candidates, how you're how you don't even have the care or concern if their process due diligence, you're just going to let the system automate it? But I'm guessing, but I think I can see big concerns over. I don't think it's inevitable that we end up with that fully automated AI, everything done by robots, and everyone just happy with it, and everyone assumes that they've got no rights, and it is how it is.
I think that just going back onto the point, Cheney, about job descriptions, you and I have talked about this quite a lot over probably the last year, and I think in general they're pretty poor across the UK. I think that there's too much detail, they're very confusing. I think that talking around X amount of years of experience excludes talented people as well, and I think there needs to be that step change. That move towards output is where I believe businesses will succeed, certainly where we're going ahead now with the support that you've been giving us.
Yeah, I think certainly around when it comes to diversity and actually accessing that broader talent pool, I think, all of that, it's almost like businesses are that keen to force their culture and values and behaviours and this, that, and the other down the throat, they lose sight of actually what the objective is, and that is to give somebody an actual job description and whether or not they can physically do a job. Because obviously that then pulls in, bias and discrimination around accessibility, about people with disabilities, about people with dyslexia and all of that kind of stuff. Do you think, and I think volume plays a lot in the whole ATS, the applicant tracking system area. I think a lot of businesses do automate that first sort of candidate, I guess, interaction with their own businesses when they know they're going to get a high amount of volume for a particular role. I'm thinking contact centers, I'm thinking sales, retail, that kind of stuff. Do you think that businesses should be upfront that they're using an ATS. And obviously I've already alluded to there, quite a lot of people who've joined our organisation didn't know what an ATS was and actually would have felt better knowing that they were turned down by a computer. Do you think that's something that employers should be more open about in terms of, the initial part of our process is automated, or?
It's a hard one for me to answer because we don't automate. And so where we've seen the benefit is that ability to keep candidates in one place, track them, the benefits of the data that we get out of that. I think it could be counterproductive. You could get people that saying, then I don't want to apply and therefore missing out on a role. I think employers have got an obligation to educate around what an ATS is and how it might work. And I'm sure there's things that we can do.
I think if you're asking a candidate to do an assessment, let's say it takes 10, 15 minutes, this could be a quick assessment, then you need to reflect that in the input that you put the other side of it. That can be automated. If that's a sort of multiple choice series of answers that why would you have a human go through that? But really, a lot of it is far more specific, subjective, and you should put the effort into that. I really don't see. I see lots of people using AI to do that quick automation, but I still don't see it's that widespread. I really don't. I think it's just helping people to automate, and I think hopefully that gives them the time to then get their other parts of the process in order.
Yeah.
So I'm surprised, obviously, the ATS vendor is very positive about ATS.
No, and I think these aren't trick questions. I think it's something that is impacting everybody who is job seeking at the minute. And obviously, that's what these podcasts are about. It's about educating people to understand the process. What can they do? Should they be contacting, CV writers to help them get around? Are they set up with keywords? What, I guess, Adrian, moving on to your hints and tips sort of section, what can candidates do to better navigate an ATS or to try and ensure that their CVs, I guess, make the cut?
Yeah, I wouldn't overthink the CV too much. I would ask a few people because, we're talking about technology a lot, but actually just reaching out and asking people. There are friendly recruitment consultants and other recruiters you'll come into contact with that will give you advice. It might differ a little bit, so aggregate that and make your own decision. But if you're not getting interviews and you've spent a decent amount of time on your CV, it's probably not the CV. Not to be rude, it probably isn't the CV. It's probably other things you're doing. So one of the things if I'm talking to a friend in a pub and they've got uncle who's looking for a job or something, maybe they haven't recruited in a while, so been a job seeker in a while, I tell them to sort of, if they are struggling, because there are some roles that are getting 200, 300, 400 applications, it's very dispiriting. And they're the roles with an easy application process. Some job boards will show you, LinkedIn shows you, for example, others will show you how many applicants they're getting for each role. So you can obviously target roles that have less applicants, but most times you don't see that. So the roles that will have less applicants, the almost guaranteed ones, are the ones with the really bad application processes. So if you go to the councils, you go to some large organizations running an old school ATS, the clue is at the start, you might have to register your username, password, put all that in. You'll quickly feel the sort of life drift out of you with the But actually remember that most people are going to drop out of that process. That organization is going to get 10% of the applicants of all the others. So if you are genuinely interested in that role in that organization, and there are many good organizations that just have a poor process, then make the effort.
Yeah, I mean, we see that as a job board. When I had a chat with because we just moved to a new platform, and the button to carry on and apply without registering is like right at the bottom in small print with the link, and I was just like, whoa, can we have that at the top in a big old box? Because I don't want to put yet another barrier in the way of somebody trying to find their way back to work, or to move roles, or to find that additional sort of flexibility. I think when we talk about ATS systems and you talk about that application process, and I think one of the big areas, especially for us, because we do have a good section of the platform that comes from our mummy jobs and daddy job sites. So you're going to get returners, you're going to get people who've got these gaps in their CVs. If, again, the automation is there or the ATS is in place in terms of that journey, does that allow for career gaps? Because I think, obviously the stories that we get from followers who have been parents is a lot of time when they go to recruiters, the recruiters will just slide that CV straight into the bin and they never hear from them again because they don't want to explain that gap. And I'm sure this has probably been covered off in loads of other podcasts, but specifically from an ATS perspective, is that as much of a problem as it is in the world of recruitment?
I don't see it as a huge. I see it as a recruiter issue, and recruiters are human beings, and they're going to be looking for the easiest solution possible. Just like candidates on your job board, Cheney.
Yeah,
they're going to make that guest application, that quick one, if they can. So what they're looking for, many recruiters, is that candidate that they can imagine. There's a bias in that as well, but that's the very nature. Who's got the experience to do the job? So the challenge is without the tech. If you've got the tech and you've got the ability to record a little video interview and you've got assessments that can show that you're suitably motivated and skilled, great. The other side of it is actually just the other stuff that sits around it, and reaching out to the recruiter, reaching out to the organization, explaining that you are genuinely interested in this role. And you'll be surprised in the world of automation and the world of sort of pushing buttons and filling out forms, there is still great scope for candidates to reach out and engage. It can be difficult. Some organizations, there's a wall, but actually that can really, that can really help.
Would you say that's true of Covea, Matthew?
Yeah, and I think Adrian's point's really valid there. We actually want candidates to reach out and speak to us. I think that's the key thing. And I think candidates worry sometimes about that. Can I get access to someone? But essentially that's what we're here to do, because it's actually that opportunity there for my team to sell the roles that we've got and talk around the business and our culture. I think often recruiters just look for the perfect candidate, and that's why we've got problems with job descriptions, and that's why they don't all often marry up. And I read a stat somewhere that said on average it's 6 seconds for a recruiter to decline someone. So I think they want to avoid having difficult conversations around, well, why have you had multiple roles, or why have you had career gaps, and come to an assumption, which is definitely bias, rather than actually thinking around what are the circumstances that individual's gone through, and are they a good fit for my organization? And again, it's an obligation on recruiters to get that right. Yeah.
And I think there definitely is a difference between the in-house recruiters and the recruiters in the recruitment consultancies of the world. I mean, how important is it that personalities is still allowed through this process? We were talking, again, it was 4 women on the call on our podcast this morning, and obviously we were putting the world to rights, especially when we're talking about transferable skills. We're all of an age where we've had children, we've had time to think about our career and do a little bit of replanning if that's what we've needed to do. Do you think this all still allows for the personality of the candidate to get across? Is now the best time ever to get your personality across? Whereas before, like you said, traditional CVs were chronological. This is what I've done, everything, and there was definitely a format, wasn't there, to old CVs? I think, have we moved on from there? I mean, I know some businesses probably haven't, but generally, Adrian, from what you're seeing, have people moved on? Matthew, how much does that help you recruit and get in touch with the candidates that you want and you want for your business?
Yeah, I think the question is, where's the capacity? Where do you build that in? So we're looking for recruitment consultants, and our ideal process, we were talking about the other day, would probably be a chat bot. There we go. But bear with me. To ask maybe 3 or 4 questions to a candidate hitting the website. We actually don't want people to apply via an application process. We would rather the chatbot just to ask them a few simple questions to explain that this is the salary of the role, because that's pretty much set. Do you drive? Because that's quite an important factor in the role. Just the real sort of yes, no type questions that are critical. Once you've been sort of done that, so the aim would be to pop up and say, look, we've got, there's 4 questions I need to ask you that's simple. After that, I can get you scheduled in for a 15-minute chat, and so you can have a quick interview. So we really want to show that you can access us, because we think that role, we will have people transferring from other industries. We will have we have an English literature graduate who's been with us 4 years, who's just now changing location and moving on to an in-house role. So we are very open to that, and we know that given role in particular is about building rapport and motivation and that side of things. So CVs don't really cut it.
I think that what we're seeing certainly, and I can only talk from my business point of view, is this move towards coffee chats, which is what Adrian's just described, that sort of 15, 20 minutes just to start to understand a candidate and see if we can marry up what they've put on the CV, but actually what they're doing in their actual life and their actual careers. I think there's definitely a shift. I think we've tried a lot more in terms of video applications, but for our graduate schemes, particularly in sort of InfoSec, where it's less of an interview and more of a sell yourself and sell your personalities. And we've seen some brilliant candidates coming through. That doesn't always work for everyone, and you can start to exclude people. But I think people are more up for trying different things now, because we know what the market's like. We know it's so hard to find candidates that you've got to try and stand out as an employer and try to hook people in.
I think, when you are looking for that best talent, I mean, is that where we are? I think that's because of everything we've gone through with COVID. People are more happy to just jump on a quick Zoom chat and get their personality across. And it's as much the employer's responsibility to sell themselves as a business as it is for your candidates to sell themselves too.
It's easier it's easier in theory to recruit. It's harder still to find the candidates because of the way the market's going, particularly if you look at tech. But for us from a recruitment point of view, having more access to candidates because they're working from home, it's easier to get Zoom calls in. You've removed that travel to where I am in Halifax to have wherever in the UK you're coming from. So it's making the process a lot easier. And I think even as you go through that process, if you think around an initial conversation, maybe a formal interview, and then maybe a final stage interview, and getting stakeholders lined up for that who might be in more senior positions, that's a lot easier to do. And I think you can start to narrow down that time to hire window that's critical for us.
So do you think there's almost like, I don't know, a networking area that needs to come into play before the ATS does in certain roles? Is it something that could be, is the ATS, the way that businesses currently use it, the right solution? Should it be further down the onboarding process in terms of, I guess, like you say, Adrian, depends on how much AI and all of that kind of stuff comes into the new developments of ATS systems? Or, because there's certain ATS systems out there that you're in one when you're in one, and it's very formulaic. You're answering the same questions over and over again for 3 or 4 different employers if they're of a certain size. Like I said, it's just as much the employer's responsibility to get their personality across, and I think something of that gets lost when you're sort of knee deep into another ATS system, if it's your 5th application of the day.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think there's a lot to be said for video interviews and giving that the opportunity to, give people an extra chance. It doesn't have to even be mandatory. It can just be, if you want to sort of support your application with a quick showcase of who you are and why you're interested, then we will absolutely give it the due course to watch it. So there's a lot to be said for that. And I think a lot to be said for just organizations just stepping up and understanding, that in order to recruit good talent, you need to be presenting yourself really well. A lot of people say, we don't get, there's no talent that, there is loads of talent out there. They're just choosing other organizations. That's the reality. And then you question, what do they see when they check out your organization? A lot of the people that we work with in the sort of sub 1,000 staff community, they don't have a great offering. Even though I repeat that, they have a good offering, they don't present a good offering.
Yeah,
so that's their process. And the last thing I say is a candidate charter. We've built a candidate charter just because we feel like we can't really preach to people about how to recruit unless we try and be as good as we can be. So that will detail out, what our commitment is if you apply, and what the process is and how you're going to be dealt with. But in very real terms, not like loosey values of every candidate deserves to be respected. It's more, you'll get a reply in this period of time. You'll get honest feedback on your interview, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for that networking element up front. A lot, especially in the digital space, there's people are doing talks, meetups, town halls, where you're inviting people that are passive candidates, and you're trying to talk to them about your business and your culture, and then you use your opportunities as a recruiter to tap them up. I think we're certainly moving into more of sort of campaign-driven recruitment through our marketing. So starting to think around, tell our story and what we're about, what the tech stacks we're using are, and not just launching on a LinkedIn role that says, here, we're hiring today. Actually, you've got to start building up a story to hook those people in, because that's the talent. It's the talent that didn't want to move but seen something about your business and now fancies that chance. Those are the people that you really need to be targeting.
Yeah. And it's weird, isn't it? Because obviously we're talking about job descriptions being output based, but businesses have to get their culture, value, behavior proposition in at some stage, because, you know, I look at my recent hires and I don't think any of them have come from, like, we've not written a job description per se. We've had people either contacting us at just the right time when we've had a need, through whatever different social media channel we're on at any given time, or through the community sites. I think that the world of work is changing. I think future of work in terms of the whole process is changing. I think the fact that a lot of people are still working from home are changing, obviously, how they want to live their work life, how they want to engage with employers. And I think that employer value proposition has had to change quite a lot. And it's whether or not businesses have been given that headspace to do it and have the opportunity to make those changes. So I think this is like kind of a question for both of you, like Adrian, where is the ATS system going to support businesses to do this? And Matthew, are you being given the time to really rethink how you guys recruit and look at becoming more candidate friendly?
If you want to be a better recruiter as an organization, you have to have an ATS. Now the ATS doesn't make you a better recruiter, but it just gives you the tools, the time, the capacity to do these things, to think about, every touch point, every email. We do simple things with onboarding customers, and it's things like just looking at the emails they're using and looking at the tone of voice and just giving them examples of templates that we've got, and looking at the content that they've also got around. It could be videos and stuff that they've got, but they don't share it. And you apply for a role, and an organization might get 60,000 applications a year. Every time someone applies via the ATS, an email comes back. It'll have the privacy policy and it'll have a thank you for applying. It might make some sort of loose commitment about when you can hear back, or if worst case, if you don't hear back in this period of time, then consider yourself unsuccessful. But that's the first interaction, is an example of a very dull email. So the ATS just gives you the opportunity to look at each point, but if you do it, it's all about the individual. You've got good recruiters who know how to do that, getting good advice. They can really build a great candidate experience. Just like a career site, there's some great ones that put a load of effort in and are innovative and showcase lots of stuff. And there's some really dull, boring ones that you think, well, why would I join that organization? Unfortunately, they tend to be from the larger companies.
I think one of the benefits, if your ATS coupled with a decent HRIS, I think that the onboarding capabilities for new hires are really good and can be tailored by role or by function. So that's definitely where we're going. In terms of your question about time to rethink, I guess I've had no choice for the last 12 months to think around what does that mean for us as a business? How can we target different areas based on where our products are being sold, and do we want to recruit from within those communities as well? What do we need to do around candidate experience? I think candidate experience is more important than it's ever been. And I think that move away from just build that infrastructure, put your systems in place, and actually now think around what's the next level. So what's the differentiator for us as Covea versus another insurer? Or actually, I'm not really bothered about that targeting our insurance industry. We want people from outside our sector. So we do diversify and we can deliver different products. So I think it's, if you look after recruitment functions, I think you're always thinking around what's next, because we can't afford to get left behind. And we're going to do a lot of learning. I think employers will do a lot of learning over the next 6 to 12 months around what this new world is like, and how does that work in terms of culture? How does that work in terms of that onward learning for people that potentially working from home all the time? They can't afford to be left behind. They can't afford to miss out on the promotion opportunity because I'm actually sat next to someone in the office and I'm more visible. So that's a really key thing for everyone to start to focus on.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of sort of psychological things playing in there. It's interesting that you say around the candidate experience being more important than ever and representing yourselves. You would think, or I think a lot of companies still think, because there is so many candidates looking for change, that actually they get to get the pick of the bunch, and they're not actually putting a lot of effort into that candidate experience. I mean, what would you guys say to those? I mean, for me, they're definitely going to lose out on the best talent. But, I think just because there is a candidate-rich marketplace doesn't mean that you don't keep trying to better yourself.
Yeah, and people will move around. People, we know that the latest generations don't need to stay in the same business for more than a couple of years. Technology will help them be more nomadic. I think if you're an organization that doesn't think around candidate first, then someone will move, someone will just choose to go elsewhere, because it's the bit Adrian talked about, that how do you make sure your culture's up front when you're talking to someone? That's the hook. It's not always about the role. The role's really key, but actually, is this going to provide me with a career? Am I going somewhere that aligns with my personal values and my ethics? And I think that's got to be what comes out really strongly in anything that you're doing, in terms of your adverts, in terms of your conversations with candidates, in terms of the vision that you sell them. Because I often think we don't do enough to sell why we recruit someone and why they're important to the business as well, that they're going to join.
Yeah, absolutely.
I guess you never really know the candidate you didn't hire, the candidate that didn't apply. So there's lots of my instinct is not to be too doom and gloom. It is that the candidate experience will, slightly change a bit, but it won't be as good as it should be. The technology is there, it is available, it is accessible, it's cheaper than it's ever been. And the knowledge is there, and you can reach out, you can listen to podcasts, you can do what you want to find that knowledge. Yeah. So there's no excuse to not improve candidate experience. But plenty of organizations, if you've got employees leaving your business, then that's very visible to the business that you go, we've got a problem here. But if you've just got very good employees that don't apply, then a lot of organizations, like I say, just put their hands up and say, well, this is the people who apply. This is the best we can do. But that clearly is not the case. They just haven't thought it through.
Yeah. Okay. So bringing it back to sort of, I guess, tips and how ATS systems sort of work in terms of the application process. When you are looking at the formulaic ones and there's a word count, a letter count in there, are they going to get discounted if they haven't fulfilled a certain amount of it? How does the actual application of an ATS system in that kind of environment work? How much do you, Matthew, get involved in terms of how your ATS process is kind of made up in terms of the application? Or is it quite simple that they just attach a CV and somebody prints it off and still reads through it, and actually your ATS comes in further down the onboarding chain? Or Adrian, similar question to you, for the ones that are that initial process, that actually where the application starts within the ATS, how easy is it for people to make it through the process? Where do people start getting, I guess, deselected?
Yeah, deselected is, that first wave is huge, because typically it's quite, if you're in the job board industry training, so you must see all the changes to quick apply, one click apply, and the big change as well is obviously that's very visible, which roles are one click apply and click apply now. So it's sort of almost forcing the hand of employers that if they want applications, they need to go with that quick apply route, which is almost like you get the applicant. It's not really an applicant, it's more like a lead, someone who's in the market, possibly looking in your general area, and then you've got to have the process your side to look after that. It's like a sales team would look after a lead as well. So there is the challenge. The one thing we put on our adverts, so we do this. Most of our clients wouldn't do it, but we say, what next? And it just says at the bottom, because particularly when you get to the bottom, have a call to action.
Yeah.
2 sentences, and I will read it quickly to you. If you're ready to help us build the UK's most helpful recruitment technology company, then click apply. Complete the short application process, 3 to 4 minutes, and we'll feed back to all applicants within 3 working days.
Yeah.
And it's nice and simple. So when they get an ATS and it says, at least they know this one's 3 to 4 minutes.
Yeah.
I think we want to make that nice and visible as well, which we're not quite able to do, but I think that'd be a nice touch. If it does take 4 minutes to apply, it just tells you.
You don't know how many jobs that I go into, and when I because we obviously like to make our jobs on our site a little bit more user friendly, the amount of times I actually go to the bottom and have to write in, please don't forget to click apply, because people get to the bottom and if the apply button's up there, they're just sort of like, right, where do I go now? I think in recruitment we can be really, because we're in it so much, we forget how alien it is to people. And there's a lot of people who are out of work now that weren't expecting to be out of work and have been maybe in their career for the last sort of 20, 30 years that are just meeting all of this technology that's out there for them. And I think you know, my mum came around last night and I was literally sat with her going, like, doing the next bit, you know, the pre-employment checks and all of that kind of stuff. And you just sat there and she wouldn't have been able to fill all that in on her own. And if I hadn't been there to help her, she could do a job. She's a social worker. She's amazing. But actually technology is not a big part of her role. So I think we have to remember who we're recruiting for and actually what age groups are going to apply. We're seeing more people than ever before who are 45 plus seeking flexibility and flexible working now. And I think ATS systems need to be designed for really easy use. And I don't think a lot of them still are.
No. Most of them are pretty poor. And it's just the way it's always been, you know, register. I mean, most of them username and password. I mean, I can go online. I go online Valentine's Day to some sort of makeup beauty website. I want an account with, I don't even know the names of them. No, I don't. I don't buy it for myself. But I can go online, do a guest purchase, use my credit card. I'm giving over my credit card details, and I don't need to create an account. So when I'm like wanting to just send, it might be, I don't know, head of HR, head of recruitment role at one organization. It's the only role I'm interested in ever in that organization, realistically. Why do I need to create an account? So, and then why does the password need to be so complex? And why it's just designed by techies, unfortunately.
Yeah, I can't agree more. I think that for me, what influence do I have over our ATS? I think it's making sure things are as simple as possible, making sure that candidates don't get lost, can click 5 or 6 buttons, provide us with the only information, the only relevant information that we need, and then we take things from there. It's that speed, and that's the bit that will, especially in the tech areas, that'll switch candidates off immediately, and they'll just go and look elsewhere.
Yeah, and you might vary that for different roles, because if you've got graduates, then it might be harder to define. You know, with 5, 6, you might need more information. So it's got to be fit for the purpose of each role.
Sure.
Yeah, and is there a way to bypass an ATS if a candidate like my mum isn't tech minded and is going to pester their 40-year-old daughter to come around and then complete an application form with them? You know, is there a way to, you know, should more businesses actually come out and say, look, you know, this is our normal application process, but if you do have accessibility issues or you're not familiar with this particular type of tech application process, pick up the phone. There's somebody here to talk to you. Is that doable?
Yeah, of course it is. And in my world, I get CVs from recruitment agencies every day that drop onto my desk, that on my virtual desk, that I'll then share internally with the relevant people to say, are you interested? And there's nothing stopping an employer taking that information and uploading it to an ATS afterwards. So we can put people into that recruitment funnel. We just choose not to more often than not.
I do think some recruiters will view people, you know, in a world where everyone wants everyone to follow the rules and keep it simple. You know, like, you know, imagine you had like a policy you were sending around the office or all the employees to sign. It was online signing, and someone decided to print it off and walk over and hand it to your desk. You would probably groan and go, "Why didn't you sign it?" Because it's all automated. And so I do think there is probably an element of groaning within some recruiters when they get someone that wants to not follow the process. I also think in order to, it's not easy to find the recruiters. Recruitment consultants are very good at it, Matthew. I used to be one. I don't know if you used to be one, but we were very good at it. So finding the person, working out their email address, all of that, you know, your mum's not going to do that chain of issue. No. So you have to be really accessible. And I think if you look at what recruitment agencies do, you know, particularly like in the care industry, I'm assuming that there'll be agencies that do social workers, and you'll read an advert, it'll have a picture of a nice, smiley, friendly person at the bottom. It will just say, call Emma to discuss this role, and you can apply. You can just call Emma, and then, you know, and that's the service they will deliver. If you're recruiting social workers, I would imagine that's the offering you've got to adapt to. It might be much harder though to do that in some other industries, because I see how small these teams are and the target put on them, and I just say that's, for many, that's just not possible.
I think for in social work, that kind of it's because it's generally public sector, right? So you're just heading straight into uncharted ATS territories, and they don't do CVs. It is literally an ATS system, but like you say, a lot of them are prehistoric and they haven't moved on because they haven't had the budget to update them, or they don't think they've got the budget to update them because when they did it the first time, it was probably ridiculously expensive. So I think you're right. I think, you know, the responsibility is there for technology companies, but I think we also shouldn't forget the human touch, because there is probably now more than ever such a huge age range of people in that job market, and where the younger end might like that technology-led application process, I think we still need to make room for those who do like to talk, or are used to picking up a phone and speaking to somebody about a role, rather than just getting dumped into an ATS system where they're not putting their best self forward because they don't have the skills and capability to do it, who then may get, I'm not going to say duped by CV writers, because I'm sure there's a lot of great CV writers out there that do provide a service for people who can't do it themselves. I think it's just, it's such a turbulent time, I think, for candidates right now, just understanding the process a little bit better and understanding that this technology is out there, exists, will hopefully help them, give them a little bit more confidence, make them not feel so demoralized every time they get turned down, that, you know, maybe it is better that a computer does it versus than a physical person, obviously depending on which ATS system sort of comes into play. I think, is there any sort of lasting comment you want to sort of give to our followers and to the people listen to this podcast now about the time we're living in, about what it's like for employers, for ATS systems, for the recruitment world at large, in terms of, you know, not giving up, or, you know, there's a different way of going about it, or not accepting the first no? What can they do? How can their journeys become easier?
Yeah, I think it's all technical. So they sort of, they have to, if they're going to have to find a way to, you know, to work with the technology, whether that's phoning up their daughter, because it is all technical. Hopefully what organizations do is choose the right technology. So maybe put WhatsApp or something. My mum's 74. She WhatsApps. She sends photos. And, you know, it's a journey she's been on to get there. It's been a real challenge, but she can do that. So, but I think most people applying for jobs and that, there is no, we're not going to change the world on this. I don't think there's a lot of old school. It's the way we've always done it, and that will be sort of the way they're going to do it for a long while. So it's just about getting the support, understanding the game as well. I hear people, like a graduate in London, you hear them interviewed on the radio or something, they'll say, I've applied to, you know, 20 jobs in the last month. Well, you know, if you're a graduate in London, you'll probably be applying to 200. You know, because there are that many jobs out there that might be viable for you potentially, if they're viable. So yeah, it's just understanding that for some people in some areas, it will be about marketing their CV. And that's because they're looking for an opportunity, they're open-minded, and they want to have conversations. Others far more specific, and then really show that you're motivated, show that you're interested in the role, you know, above and beyond. Because everyone's doing the same thing, you have an opportunity maybe to stand out if you can find a way to do that. Because obviously there's all these walls put up. It's not easy to get to the recruiter.
Yeah.
I think the other thing from an employer's point of view is provide feedback about the process. So Glassdoor is really accessible. I can tell you, as someone that monitors our Glassdoor reports on a weekly basis and looks for the good things, then I also need to look for the things that are negative that we need to pick up. And I think that's a public window then, isn't it? So where a process isn't stacking up, it's not making the adjustments that you need for whatever reason that needs to be, then call it out. If you're not getting feedback, call it out. Yeah,
I think candidates should definitely it's how I think we get lost in recruitment. I think we do, because we are in it all the time. Like, my mum wouldn't know what Glassdoor is. My mum wouldn't know who's a good company to work for, who isn't, without somebody that she knows who works there telling her that. And I think, I think it's a tough one for candidates to get that research, especially over a certain age. And unfortunately, there are more people of a certain age who throughout COVID have either lost their jobs or have been furloughed, or, you know, look at the automation that's impacted the retail sector. Absolutely thousands of people have lost their jobs there. We're about to see thousands of people lose their jobs in the healthcare sector as the actually, by the time this podcast out, it'll have already happened. September the 13th is the date no job comes in, and there is a lot of people in the health sector who are refusing to get vaccinated. So an absolute flood of applicants with a specific skill set coming out, and are going to have to look to reskill because they're not going to be able to find another role within healthcare because they're refusing the vaccination. I think, you know, ATS is going to play a big part in that. Let's hope these ATS systems are picking up on the transferable skills, because there's going to be a lot of people looking to go into hospitality, into customer services, into these customer facing roles that just aren't specifically in healthcare. And hopefully businesses will be savvy enough to know that this is coming and that there's an opportunity to get some really fantastic talent and ideally adjust their ATS systems or their recruitment processes to allow these people to make that jump into other industries.
Completely.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for your time, guys. We're gonna close it there. Hopefully, everybody who's listening has had their eyes open to the world of recruitment and to understand our acronyms a little bit more and understanding why they need to invest some time into learning the technologies that are out there. I really appreciate your time, guys. Have you got any departing comments for our listeners?
Climate change. I think that's the next challenge for organisations to present themselves on. I think this year was about inclusivity. I think next year will be all about carbon footprint, climate change. Not for everyone, but plenty of organisations are going to have to start thinking about how they tell that story and how they sort of present themselves as a conscientious company. So that's the next challenge.
Absolutely. And funnily enough, our next podcast season, when we get around to recording that, is all about our societal change maker accreditation and how businesses can talk about sustainability, about climate, and not just that, actually their impact on the broader world, the social communities, about how businesses need to impact education. So yeah, absolutely, Adrian, completely with you there. We'll have you back for that one. I know Matthew's already on the case.
I don't know enough about it. I just know that's clearly the next thing coming down the line, isn't it? So I'm probably not the guy at the moment, at least.
You'll be well versed by next year. Matthew, how about you?
No, I think it's still for me that social mobility conversation that businesses need to start to really take seriously. I know obviously we've talked about societal change maker and looking forward to the outputs from that. And then the other conversations we've had is around the impact of automation and in my world, the impact of automation in contact centres and what does that mean for reskilling people that when we start to remove all the mundane tasks that they have to do now.
Yeah, I think it's going to have a really big impact on those entry-level careers. So again, another podcast down the pike. Well, thank you very much, guys, for your time today, and we'll see everybody else on podcast 4.